My husband and I moved into the house we currently live in a little over 4 years ago. We live on Long Island, New York, in a very old colonial house built in 1907. Ever since moving in, we've experienced some very strange things. The first experience still freaks me out to this day. I left work early as I was sick with a cold. I went straight upstairs to our bedroom to take a nap. After lying in bed for a few short minutes, I heard the sound of someone coming up the stairs. Clear as day footsteps on each step. Now, our staircase has 2 sets of stairs with a landing in between. So the entity made its way slowly up the first set, paused for a moment, then the second set. Our bedroom door sits at the top of the stairs. Whatever it was, it just stopped right at our door. I rationalized it as my husband coming home from work, but it didn't make sense as he wouldn't be due to come home for another hour and a half. And in my heart I knew it wasn't him. I genuinely got such a scared feeling, my entire body stiffened up and all of my senses heightened. Later, when my husband did come home, I asked him if he came home early and then maybe went downstairs again, and told him what I heard. He said that no, he just got home. But he didn't quite believe me. Well, about a month later he experienced the same thing. He was home from work alone and laid down to take a nap when he heard footsteps coming up the stairs. He then started believing we weren't alone in the house. We had our baby, a boy, in 2021, and one night I was up breastfeeding him. I used to go downstairs to our living room so my husband could sleep as he went back to work after paternity leave. So I'm sitting on my big comfy armchair, snuggling our newborn who fell asleep in my arms, when I suddenly hear footsteps upstairs. Clear as day, footsteps in our upstairs hallway. I freeze and listen carefully, knowing that I didn't hear our bedroom door open, so it couldn't be my husband. Oddly enough, about 10 minutes later my husband does get up to use the bathroom, and I call up to him and ask if he was up before, to which he said no, he just got up then to go to the bathroom. I was so creeped out I refused to breastfeed downstairs anymore and only did it in our bedroom from then on. The last big thing that happened was my mom, who lives out of state, was coming to visit and babysat for us to give us our first official date night out since having our son. We got home after dinner and my mom looked horrified. She said that she was sitting in the rocking chair while my son was asleep in her arms when suddenly she heard footsteps outside the bedroom door and then 3 loud bangs against it, like someone was banging their fists against it angrily. She said she jumped right up and opened the door to check, but no one was there. She anxiously awaited our arrival back and has been afraid to stay with us ever since. Since then, we've experienced little things here and there, but it seems the activity has died down. My son is older now and has told us that the walls in his room talk to him, which creeped us out, but we chalked it up to overactive toddler imagination. I'm honestly glad that nothing has really happened since then, as it sincerely freaks me out and I don't want my son getting scared either. When I was very young, much younger than today, my mother tucked me in at night, and every night she'd say, "Say your prayers, turn off the light, and rest your weary head." And just before she'd leave, she'd add, "Just don't get out of bed." Now, it's been many years since I last slept within those walls. But hazy though it might be now, there's something I recall. The time for sleep was close at hand, and though I tried to fight, my mother tucked me into bed and gently said a good night. But shortly after she had left, I felt a nagging thought. I ventured from my cozy bed for what I've now forgot. How strange the house became at night, foreboding to explore. Alone, without a hint of light, I ran to Mother's door. I turned the knob and entered in, quiet as a mouse. And never saw, before or since, such things within that house. What happened next, my mother said, could not have really been And even after all these years, I don't know what I'd seen. I saw a figure in the dark, hunched over Mother's bed, breathing deep and sighing as it cradled Mother's head. I rubbed my eyes and squinted hard, though I could hardly see. I swear its head had swiveled round and looked, I think, at me. We stood there, it and I, as if stuck inside a trance. Something so awful, so strange, yet familiar in its glance. I looked at Mother's face once more, laying in her bed. Or was it that I saw her face in that dark figure's head? A hand began to slowly stretch across the yawning black. And something told me that I must, or mustn't, double back. My back was halfway turned when there emerged a curious sound. I lost my breath and felt my body sink into the ground. A cry, a scream, a laugh, a song. I still don't know for sure. The sounds I heard the figure make, I'd never heard before. I don't know what the thing did next, but I remember what it said, with crooked parts of Mother's voice. You should not be out of bed. As quickly as it started, just as quickly would it end. I found myself alone in bed, no trace of Mother's or friend. Now, it's been many years since then. My mother is long dead. And no matter how she calls my name at night, I won't get out of bed. My family has been living in our current home since 2016, and over the years, we have had several strange experiences in our home. Our culture is relatively superstitious, so not many of us were skeptical that these experiences were actually paranormal in nature. My family and I have even become used to the existence of this presence within our home, and continue with our daily lives as we've learned to be nonchalant about this. I recently told a few friends about my house ghost and some of the little stories we've had. And though the conversation was mainly fun and games, two of them told me they were scared for me, because this friendly ghost sounded more like a demon to them. Now nobody in my family has really played with the idea that whatever is in our house may in fact be a malicious entity. Before I begin, I want to share the structure of the house as well as some of its history, as it might add context. My grandmother purchased this home in 2016. It's a duplex. For those who may be unfamiliar, think of it as a double-sided house with one home on each end. He lives in one half, and my immediate family lives in other half. The walls are also pretty thin. We can hear the vacuum over the floor when we're downstairs, and I can hear my parents' TV every night before bed. If it's quiet enough, you can hear anyone talk through the walls. My immediate family has lived here since the beginning, but we've had a variety of family members live with us throughout the years, so I might mention an uncle or cousin who is not mentioned in another story. Now to the history. My grandfather purchased this home at an incredibly cheap price. We live in a large metropolitan area where house prices are skyrocketing every year. This house, as he had told us, was a deal and only needed to be renovated a little. This sounded great to my parents and my aunt and uncle, who agreed to live in the other half of the duplex until they finally got to see what they were working with. I never personally saw the home before it was renovated, but according to my mom, it was priced low for a reason. The floors were completely worn down, the bathtubs and the toilets looked like they had never been cleaned before. My mom described the smell as something deathly, and there were several injection needles and ashes found throughout the home. What scarred her the most though were the dirty toys found on the floor, a fallen wheelchair that looked too small for an adult, and drawings in one room written in blood. She also claimed that there was candles and other trinkets in the corner of another room that looked like a satanic altar. If this sounds insane to you, trust me when I say it sounded completely dumb to me at the time. My dad is a complete non-believer and doesn't believe in superstitions, so he confirmed everything she saw, but he doesn't believe that the corner with candles was an altar. I took her story with a grain of salt. My mom and my aunt were pretty overwhelmed with the stuff they saw, and paranormal stuff aside, they weren't comfortable with the overall vibe of the place. It's within our culture to have a priest bless the home you move into, but they had him come before we even moved just to cleanse the air. We moved into the home once it was completely remodeled, and all the remnants left by the previous owners were now gone. The following are what I think, the encounters that stand out the most. I changed names of people for the purpose of anonymity. I tried my best to be accurate with the timeline, but my memory is fuzzy, so bear with me. In 2017, the first summer after moving in, the school year had just ended and I was watching TV downstairs after finishing breakfast. My dog was also laying on the couch with me. I heard very loud thumps coming from upstairs. My older brother was really into fitness at the time, and his bedroom was one of two rooms right above the living room. I figured he was doing one of his workouts again. The noise became way too loud, and it was starting to muffle the sound of our TV. Annoyed, I called his phone and asked, "What the fuck are you doing upstairs? Just go work out outside, you're being too noisy." After a few back and 40 insults he replies, "Anyway, I'm not even home right now, I'm hanging out with friends." It's probably Sarah. Sarah is our younger sister, her room is also right above the living room. I called her asking the same thing. She replies, "You're stupid, I'm not even home right now, I came to school for something." It's Hank, our older brother. He's not home either, I say. Well then you're home alone because mom is out working." My heart sank once she said that, but I didn't have too much time to react. I call my best friend telling her what just happened, and out of nowhere, my dog gets off the couch and begins barking and growling at an empty hallway. Now this dog was the least aggressive pup you could have met, and I tried to get him to calm down because, even with all this, I was still more annoyed than scared. It wasn't until he stepped in front of me and began growling at the hallway where I really started counting my minutes. I freaked out. "Paco, what's wrong? Stop growling." He suddenly stopped and went back to lay on the couch as if nothing happened. My survival instincts were comically slow, because I left my house only until after that whole thing was over. I told my family, and it really only became a silly story. We didn't really give it much thought besides, "Looks like we have a ghost in the house." And in the summer of 2018, my family had just come home from dinner. At this time, we had a relative living in a spare bedroom while his apartment got fumigated. My brother and I really needed to use the bathroom, so we're the first ones out the car only to realize the door was locked. Neither of us had a key, so we walked to the side of the house and knocked on the window of the guest bedroom, seeing if we could get our relative to open the door for us. We received no answer, but we did hear a very loud crash. The rest of our family came and we realized no one had a key. My uncle figured my relative was inside as everyone else heard the bang too. He called him, "Hey dude, what the hell did you drop inside? Can you come open the door for us?" Our relative replies, "You guys are crazy, I'm not at the house right now." None of us thought much of it, and we got our granddad to open the door with his spare key. The second we turn the lights off, my mom gives out a shriek. All of our cabinet doors were wide open, and several rows of dishes and mugs lay broken on the floor. How could this get even weirder? The glass jars placed against the wall and directly under the cabinets were also broken, though physically it seemed impossible because there was no way the dishes that fell from the cabinets could have had hit the jars on the counter. My dad blamed it on faulty cabinet shelves, but after checking all of them, he was able to confirm that none of them had tilted. In the fall of 2018, as told by my brother Hank was on a call with his girlfriend. He was laying on his bed facing the wall, with his back to the door. All of a sudden, he felt the corner of his bed sink a little, as if someone was sitting down on it. He turned to see if someone was there, but no one was, and thought maybe he just imagined it. He goes back to talking with his girlfriend when a few seconds later he hears something slap down on his bed. This time he knew he wasn't imagining, because his girlfriend on the other end of the line asked, "What was that noise?" My brother deduced our nephew was messing with him. He thought he probably sneaked into his bedroom and figured he just hadn't heard his door open because he was on the phone. My nephew was quite playful like this, so it wasn't anything new. My brother told his girlfriend, "Oh, give me a second, I'm gonna check who's in my room." He thought my nephew was hiding, so he looked under his bed, and the space was completely empty. He checked the closet, empty. This is when my brother got scared, and he rushed to go to my parents. But just for a few short seconds, the door wouldn't budge open. To this day he's not sure if he wasn't able to open it in his panic, or if something wasn't letting him out. In the November of 2022, the last memorable encounter, it was Thanksgiving weekend and a couple's family members were in town to visit. My aunt and her family were borrowing my room, and I stayed with my sister in hers. We had gotten a cat the year before, and coincidentally, there hadn't been much activity with our house ghost since he started living with us. My sister usually left her door open every night because our cat liked to come in and out of her room throughout the night. The both of us also have a tendency to stay up pretty late. So there we were scrolling through our phones around 2 a.m. Her LED lights were still on, but the darkness from the hallway seeped into the doorway. My attention is focused on my phone when Sarah starts to tap my shoulder quite forcefully. Annoyed, I look at her and ask, "What the hell do you want?" My sister's face is covered in panic. She can't get any words, all she can do is point urgently at the door. I see what has her so scared. There's a little set of eyes looking at us from the doorway. I knew it was a little girl, her hair cascading down the side of her head, and we could only see the top half of her face. My reaction surely didn't help my sister. We both freaked out and hid under the bed sheets and just started praying. Our brother Stan was staying next door, and we knew he was awake, so we called him through our phones multiple times. He finally came into my room, but my brother's the biggest skeptic you can meet. He shoved our story off and said we were probably just too sleepy, and closed the door for us. These were the most significant stories that have happened with our house ghost. You may notice large gaps in between each of them, but I figured all other experiences weren't large enough to include here. Apart from these, my family and I have been pretty used to the radio and TV turning on by themselves. There's constant walking in our hallways, especially at night, and there's always noise you can hear from empty rooms. I also want to focus on one last detail. The house ghost had become sort of a running joke in the family, so much so that I even named it Jack. Coincidence or not, I noticed that the more aggressive occurrences had happened after we started calling it Jack. Sometime between 2018 and 2019, a social worker came for an announced visit to check on the kids in our home. But to her surprise and ours, the kids in question were not the ones currently living in our house. She had come to check on children belonging to the previous tenants. Our CPS system is constantly overwhelmed with loads of cases, so it was easy to understand why their records were not updated with our information. We mentioned this story to a neighbor as casual conversation, and she told us about the people who used to live in our house. They were meth addicts and constantly caused a ruckus from their home. They also had 2 kids, one of which was a disabled girl who they abused a lot. CPS was called on them lots of times, but nobody in the neighborhood really knows whatever happened to the family. It wasn't too long after when my grandfather bought the place. After hearing this story, I joked maybe the ghost was just annoyed I gave it a boy name and it's really been the girl. So we started naming it Jackie. And apart from the instance in 2022, we haven't had any aggressive or memorable occurrences like the ones before. We've jokingly said our cat probably scared it off too, because we also haven't really been hearing any of the walking or knocking in the hallways in a while. I've been out of town the last few days, but my mom mentioned that they think Jackie is back because of a video my cousin captured. To be completely honest, the video in question is pretty unalarming. I'll post it here as well for you to make your own opinions on it, but I personally think that it's only eerie once you take into account the context behind it. My cousin said the bang in this video happened 3 times, and he was only able to get his phone in time to just get the last bit of it. He also opened the window to see if someone could have been outside, but saw no one. Now that you've read my story, I want to hear opinions on what you may think. We're moving out soon, so I guess I've always wanted to figure out the mystery behind all these little encounters. Could it be just a friendly ghost or perhaps something more evil? I also welcome all degrees of skepticism. At the end of the day, my culture is accepting of these kinds of beliefs, and I myself have always believed in the afterlife and the possibility of other souls and entities living amongst the living.